Oh, but we should announce something.
Didn't you think it'd make more sense if I sat here and Alex on the end, Jackie? Wouldn't that make more sense if Alex on the end? Three of us together, no?
Well, just in case there's a question or whatever. It's the way it used to be.
Visually, it's like you said, bad optics. Me over here, you over there, but if you want it that way, that's your decision. Go for it. Oh, hi. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, it's sent out. It just started. Musical chairs, the music stops.
Yes, sir. Jimmy, you're gonna have to let Martha Callahan and John Rushkey as presented.
In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meeting Act, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and forwarding to the officially designated newspapers that this meeting would take place at Town Hall at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, October 20th. Please stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a roll call, please?
Here.
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 Here. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll begin with the reports. First, I want to acknowledge that this is Red Ribbon Week. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse affects millions of families in our nation, whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention, education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate the demands for drugs and the access to drugs and alcohol. Whereas the Governor's Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse and the Millburn Municipal Alliance Committee are sponsoring the 2020 Red Ribbon Campaign, offering citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to a drug-free lifestyle, meaning no illegal drugs, no illegal use of legal drugs, and whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd through the 31st. Whereas the Township of Millburn commits its resources to ensure the success of the Red Ribbon Campaign and encourages businesses, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical, religious institutions, schools, senior citizen service organizations, and youth to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free, healthy lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Township of Millburn does hereby support October 23rd to 31st, Red Ribbon Week, and encourages the citizens to participate in alcohol and drug prevention education activities, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to promoting a drug-free community.
That means it's a serious statement.
And to continue with the committee reports. We currently have 191 cases of COVID-19 in the township. Essex County is reporting 22,606. 83% have recovered. These are cumulative cases, and those residents that have recovered are still counted as part of the total. As you all know, Governor Murphy has mandated that masks be worn at all times when social distancing is not possible. Essex County continues to offer free testing for residents multiple times per week. Please register at essexcovid.org. We've extended outdoor dining on Main Street and will continue to review on a weekly basis. We have numerous restaurants enjoying creative outdoor dining throughout the township, including a parking lot on Essex and Main, a parklet on Main Street below Millburn Ave, and other private lots. Please be sure to participate and support our local businesses. Remember to wear your mask in accordance to Executive Order 163. The November 3rd general election is primarily a vote by mail as per the governor's orders. Essex County has begun sending out all the vote by mail ballots to every registered voter. Please confirm your mailbox. Once your ballot is complete, you'll have 4 options to return it. The drop box at Essex County, mail the ballot by the U.S. Postal Service, hand deliver to the Board of Elections in Newark, or hand deliver your vote by mail ballot to a board worker at the polling location on November 3rd from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Please remember, do not detach the certification flap. Fall curbside leaf collection begins on October 19th. Collection is scheduled for curbside pickup 3 times per zone between the month of October and December. You can check your schedule on the website twp.millburn.nj.us, DPW pamphlet. The farmers market will operate 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Tuesdays through the end of October. Please be sure to visit. Community Service Award Committee met on Zoom and discussed the inclusion of an award for younger people as well as adults. This is to recognize the volunteer activities of young heroes who have enhanced the quality of life for Millburn residents. This expansion has been proposed by a young woman Life Scout in the St. Rose of Lima Troop 19, and the project includes a whole program for engagement, participation, website design, and award criteria for selection by the committee. October 13th, Committeewoman Eglo, Business Administrator Alec Mcdonald, and myself attended a Zoom hosted by JCP&L. That was a joint between Essex County OEM and JCP&L to discuss Hurricane Isaias and the aftermath. During that storm, almost 800,000 of JCP&L's 1.1 million clients were out of service, and it was the second worst storm in their history, only second to Hurricane Sandy, and 4 days shorter than Irene. They explained that the problem delays that occurred in Millburn Short Hills were a result of quarantine circuits, meaning that the numerous lines required extra safety protocols because they were live wires. They assured us that going forward, we will have better communication and more consistent information with with our neighboring municipalities, getting more accurate updates and response times. As soon as they finish sharing their data with other communities, a Zoom presentation will be available to all residents. Halloween. Millburn will be following the New Jersey Department of Health guidelines that are posted on our website. These include some of the following. Outdoor activities are preferred as opposed to any indoor parties or events. Those planning celebrations or participation on Halloween should keep in mind all the public health recommendations of social distancing and physical distancing. Wear masks that cover both your nose and mouth, and hand hygiene. Outdoor door-to-door trick-or-treating, those who plan to do so should limit their groups to current household members, consider staying local, and limit the number of houses on the route. Social distancing should be practiced between all of those who are not in the same household. For those putting out treats, arrange individually packaged candy so they can grab and go rather than a shared bowl. Consider coordinating with neighbors to develop a system, signs or some kind of lighting on porches that will distinguish houses that are participating. Candy should be commercially packaged and non-perishable. Consider other treats to avoid sharing of food. Please consult our website, exercise good judgment, and follow all the protocols. The Bid Sid group met on Thursday, October 15th at 7 p.m. and discussed a variety of initiatives for a fall program. To begin, there will be a Halloween trick or treat on Friday, October 30th from 3 to 6 p.m. on Main Street. There'll be a photo booth opportunity station with foliage. Merchant participation in trick or treat activities and specialty goodie bags with candy and merchant discounts will be available for distribution on a first come, first served basis. Additionally, at that meeting, we had a preliminary review of our bylaws, committee assignments, short-term planning, including a directory of businesses, social media initiatives, business engagement, logo design. We hired a part-time marketing media consultant, Marla Itzkin, who previously had a long tenure with the Westfield Area YMCA as the Director of Communications and Marketing to help us with our fall/winter programs as we continue to search for an executive director. She had a long industry history with the Y and extensive experience in social media, print advertising, and special projects. Thank you. That concludes my reports, Mr. Wasserman.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor. This morning, I'll keep my remarks short. Our downtown visioning kickoff happened this morning at 9 o'clock. Committeewoman Eglo and I were, I guess, co-chairing this for this morning. It was a very productive meeting. It's a very exciting process. Eastman Perkins brought their team. We had our steering committee. We have a wonderful group of volunteers. There's a lot of excitement, about getting this process started. It's going to be an approximately 6-month process, including analysis and the team walked the township, and there was also a lot of discussion of having our teenagers also involved in the process through. And I think that was an exciting part of it also. So I just wanted to mention that, and I also want to mention that I want to encourage my colleagues to consider keeping Main Street closed, through the balance of the year. I think that it's going well. I don't see a downside. I know the schools are not fully back, and I really see that our local merchants are benefiting. The other day, I was walking around during the weekend, and I was amazed at how many neighbors from out of town were in attendance. I just think it's a positive thing to do. If we make a decision sooner rather than later, at least our restaurants and merchants could do some planning for the next several weeks. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I've also been in touch with first aid, and I don't think there's been any incidences. I don't think there's a downside, and I'm comfortable that there's not a downside. There's just an upside to having this available.
Thank you. Ms. Burstein, do you have any committee reports, please?
I do, but can I go last only because I have to move.
I'm
I
sorry.
have to move my location, so I'm just gonna go to another room, and if Diane can do hers first, that would be great.
Hi, good evening. I just want to piggyback on what Jackie said about the JCP&L. The extent of the damage was, I think, beyond what anybody realized. I mean, you heard how incredibly hard and fast they got Millburn back online. You know, I know it was frustrating for those who didn't have power, but I just want to commend JCP&L and Carol Bianchi, who is our rep, to a really strong recovery. I did go to the SID meeting on Thursday night. Something that I wanted to bring up. I did reach out to the chamber, and we're having the park winter walk. And I just think it might be something the SID might want to consider, is partnering with the chamber and possibly lighting up Upper Millburn Avenue in downtown instead of the park. Because I have heard a few, people remark that it's a great day, but we march in the park, but it doesn't necessarily transform to business in town. So maybe we could partner, if the chamber would be willing to talk about that with the SID, using those decorations throughout the avenue. Might be a nice change. The other thing is the steering committee. Committeewoman Prupus asked me to take her place. She did discuss that with you, Jackie.
No, it was not discussed,
Oh.
and we will not be discussing it this evening.
Okay, well, it was a good meeting. There's a broad base of knowledge from Perkins Eastman, and I guess a conversation with Tara will have to take another. Okay, thank you, Jackie. Oh, one more thing, excuse me. I see that on the agenda, you've moved public comment. I don't know if people are aware of that.
Well, we'll discuss that shortly. Thank you.
Okay. So I attended 2 meetings within the past week. The Rec Commission, the Giro Park basketball court is completed and lit. They're discussing fundraising for a scoreboard at the library field. For Taylor Park, they're waiting to see if they need a permit to fix the bridges. There should be signs around town, Mask Up Millburn, reminding people to wear masks in parks and playgrounds, and for parents and spectators at sporting events. 2 pickleball courts have been striped, one at Taylor Park and one at Giro Park, and you can make reservations for those courts. Fall programs are going strong. There's close to 1,500 kids in those programs, and the winter programs are still being worked on. I also attended a meeting at the library Board of Trustees. November 2nd at 2 p.m. There will be a fireside book chat where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. There'll be a Zoom link sent out after sign up. And the library has a new mascot, Hootie the Owl. There was a contest, and the mascot winner is Marie Rella, a 13-year-old. And there were also winners in 3 other categories. Youth category, Henry Yang, Who Loves Books. The Studious Squirrel in the teen category, and Bindo, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, in the adult category. On December 8th, there'll be museum night. Nick Dawes on Selma, I can't read my handwriting, Gundy Club in New York City. It's an arts club, and he will be discussing arts clubs from that club. And those are my reports.
Thank you. Mr. Falcon, nice to see you.
Next mediation session, I think,
Kid needs to speak up.
Get to your mic.
Yeah. Maybe bring it forward to you.
As I was saying, the next mediation session of the declaratory judgment affordable housing case will take place, I believe, in the first week of November. I think I remember correctly, the 6th, and thereafter we'll be reporting as to what will be occurring next. At the last meeting, Committeewoman Iglo posed a good question, you may recall, in connection with the transfer of the $19,000 to the District Management Corporation, as to what would be the consequences with respect to those funds in the event that in the future the SID ordinance was disallowed. I've concluded that since the transfer of funds is being made while the ordinance continues to remain in effect, also pursuant to an approved municipal budget line item, and in accordance with the language in the ordinance authorizing the provision of funds to promote economic stimulus in the business district, that providing the funds is valid and lawful. But more to your point, if the ordinance were to be found invalid, if there was any balance at that point that had not been expended, then that would not be able to be spent. That would have to be sent back. But otherwise, the funds currently being forwarded would be validly spent if they're, spent for legitimate purposes pursuant to the SID. That's my report.
Mr. McDonald?
Well, there's a few presentations for the committee tonight. However, just one brief update is that if the committee may recall, a while back we had engaged in a firm to do an analysis of our streets and roadways, as well as other assets, curbing, sidewalks, and signage. We're getting some of that analysis back, which is great. It will be a fantastic tool for our engineering department and our capital budgeting going forward to make data-driven decisions on where paving and other monies are sort of allocated to the greatest need. So we'll be happy to share that once we've gotten all of that data and sort of sifted through it and can put it in a presentation for the committee. But it's going to be a great tool for us.
Thank you. Mr. Falk, thank you. I want to remind everyone that this is a business meeting. Yes, I was just going to reiterate this. Again, this is a business meeting and everyone should comport themselves appropriately, whether or not they attend in person or remotely. Going forward, yelling out from the crowd or showing disrespect for our neighbors or committee members will not be tolerated. If a member of the public disrupts the meeting, I will advise you with a warning that you are disrupting the meeting, and if it continues, you will be instructed that you are disrupting the meeting and preventing the business from proceeding and will either be muted or asked to leave the building. Public comments will be strictly limited to 3 minutes, and when 30 seconds are remaining, Mr. Homsey will state 30 seconds remaining, so that may conclude your public comment. Each individual will be given 1 opportunity to make their public comment. Now we will be proceeding with the Environmental Commission update and ban on single-use plastics. I will turn this over to our Environmental Commission Chair, Priya Patel.
Good evening, Mayor. At the last meeting, the Township Committee had requested that we provide some information, specifically in the form of feedback from the retailers that I had reported on last week as being in compliance but not truly fulfilling the spirit of the ordinance, which is to basically stop using the plastic bags. So since then, I just want to report out on some of the feedback that I've gotten. So number one, from Trader Joe's, which just to refresh your memory, what they were doing was that they were not allowing folks to bring in reusable bags, and they were also providing plastic bags. And when I spoke with the store manager, she said that essentially they were doing that because there's been a paper bag shortage, and that they will be discontinuing plastic bags, and so they will be in compliance. The short version. CVS, I talked to the store manager. So currently CVS is providing plastic bags, but those bags are made out of 80% post-consumer recycled material. After speaking to them, they said that this is what they've been told by their corporate office, that those bags are in fact reusable, they're not plastic, and they have no real intention of changing their practice as of now. ShopRite, I spoke with Amanda Fisher, who is the marketing manager, who Committeewoman Eglo and I and other members from the Environmental Commission were working with to pass the ordinance, and she reported that they're basically waiting for the state law to pass. And this is kind of what they had told us last year. Because they have so many locations throughout the state, they're really looking for some sort of uniformity. And to that end, they don't expect to be changing their practices anytime soon. They're hoping that if the state law passes, then they'll have to comply by 2022. And then finally, with Walgreens, Walgreens is not providing a plastic bag currently, but they are providing paper bags, but they were not charging a fee for them. So after speaking to them, I think they just didn't really read the ordinance. So I spoke to the regional manager, and they are expecting to be compliant shortly. I think that's pretty much it. I did provide the red line version for Committeewoman Burstein's request. That shows you the changes that we are proposing. And in sum, the changes really come down to 2 things. One is the definition of the reusable bag, and then the second thing is the fee. Whereas currently we have a fee of 10 cents, we're proposing that it be bumped up to 25 cents, right, to create even more of a disincentive for folks to be using these bags. The reusable bag, just briefly, would have stitched handles for reinforcement. They would be at least 10 mils thick, which is, to give you a sense of that, it's about 10 sheets of paper stacked up. So that's about how thick 10 mils is. And they'd be manufactured for multiple reuse, and they would be washable. And this language pretty much reflects the language that's in this proposed state bill. So with that, I know that we were advised at the last meeting that if this amendment were to take effect, we'd have to get that through by the end of this year. So I wanted to see if that were something that was within the realm of possibility.
What would you like to?
I reread the definition on the red line. I think it's a very clear definition. I have no objections. The objective is clear, but no objections.
Ms. Burstein, do you have anything you'd like to add about this?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. I have nothing else to add as well.
So what's the next steps?
Yep. Okay, so I would encourage the Environmental Commission to proceed. Did you want to add something, Mr. Hilsenrath? Okay. And prepared for a first read on November 10th? Yes?
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
And we should also make sure that our retailers, make sure everybody's invited. You know, I mean, I think it's a very good, I think it's a good idea to what we're doing, but let's make sure everybody's invited. So, you know, so everybody is heard.
Thank you, Ed and Priya, and your whole committee, and Tara, who's not here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, our volunteers are the best. I just wanted to, you know, I don't think people are thanked enough. And I think when you go to, as a committee person, when you go to all these meetings, I'm always astonished at how much time people put in for our township. So, but thank you very much. That's really appreciated.
Okay, the next will be a presentation of downtown flooding by Mcdonald.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I'll just
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just introduce this a bit. So a while back, the township committee had authorized a study of the downtown area flooding in relation to between Taylor Park and the train trestle by the library cowpath. We engaged Mcdonald and specifically John Rushke, who's with us tonight, as well as Martha Callahan, who is the township engineer, which will be presenting the findings from that study. And then there will be, I think, an additional sort of request in regards to this, which Martha and I will make at the end of this brief presentation. John, all you.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening, Mayor and committee members. As Alex indicated, my name is John Rushke. I'm a professional engineer with Mcdonald, and I was the project manager for the hydraulic analysis that was done in the downtown area. The analysis basically started with getting a copy of the Army Corps analysis that was done on the west branch of the Royal River. That study it extends a very extensive length of the river, but we truncated it just to focus in the area of Millburn. So we are using the best available information that we have today. Just wanted to note that back in 2008, Mcdonald actually looked at the downtown area, and again, looking at the footer building. And at that time, the analysis was done based on a model developed by FEMA. And that model did have some limitations regarding the amount of data that was used to generate that model. So if you go back and look at our current report that's based on the more sophisticated model developed by the Army Corps versus the older model that was done by the FEMA, you will see differences in conclusions and impacts of looking at the flood mitigation efforts. But we did base it on the best information that's available today to come up with our conclusions. So the Army Corps model is an extensive model. It gives good data. It gives a good overview of what we can see when we look at improvements within the downtown and looking at the impacts of flow and elevation. There is another component of the HEC-ROS model that we did not use. It's actually a 2D analysis that looks at, it's a more three-dimensional. They call it 2D basically because it's looking at a planimetric view. But with the 2D model, you can actually look at flood elevations through a specific cross section. So for example, if we wanted to know what the flood elevation is on Main Street versus the main channel, we could calculate that differences. But the model that the Army Corps did, it basically averages the changes. So the model that we use is good. good for a analysis of looking at overall impacts. But if you really wanted to go into, micro analyze, the downtown, the 2D analysis would be a way to go. But for ultimately for what we were tasked to do, the Army Corps is more than sufficient to conclude with some results of what we looked at. Through the model, we looked at various storm events. We looked at a 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm event. The storm event is basically a storm that would occur statistically within that period. So, a 10-year storm statistically will happen once in 10 years. Likewise, a 100-year storm happens once every 100 years. We did focus just in the downtown area, and the analysis did look at primarily the Futter building and looking at alternatives of, if we remove the Futter building, what other improvements could be done to further improve the flooding in the downtown area. So let me share my screen if I could. So this is a report that's attached to the agenda. It's the report that we issued in March, and I just started to go through the introduction, but I just wanted to highlight the alternatives. These are alternatives that we evaluated with our analysis. Our first option that we looked at was just removing the Futter building, no other improvements within the downtown area. The second option was to look at removing the Futter building, and then also enlarging the channel between the Futter building and the Millburn Avenue Bridge, because right in that location, the channel does narrow, and we wanted to just have that continuous water course between Essex Street and Millburn Avenue and see what the improvements are with that. The third option is we looked at same as option 1 and 2, basically removing the Futter building and enlarging the channel. But then we also looked at enlarging or putting flood walls in between the Essex Street Bridge and the railroad, basically forcing the water into the area and try to eliminate the flooding that occurs. Basically the flow divides around the Essex Street Bridge, and it goes to Main Street. And so we're trying to focus more of the water going just into the main channel and try to eliminate some of that. And then the last option we looked at is all those 3 options, plus enlarging the Millburn Avenue Bridge. Within the downtown area, there are primarily 3 structures that really are control structures that restrict the flow within the downtown area. It's a Essex Street Bridge, it's the Futter building, and then the Millburn Avenue Bridge. Those 3 structures have a significant impact on flood elevations within the downtown area. So this is just a photo of the general area, but this is where I was saying regarding we installed basically flood walls in this area from Essex and the railroad, just forcing the flow into the main channel, and looking at the Futter building and also Millburn Avenue. We did focus on elevations all the way down to the Taylor Park Bridge. So we were looking at whatever improvements that we looked at in the downtown area, what impacts are we going to have downstream, and we looked at that. Again, we're using the Army Corps model. Now, the Army Corps model, it was a more current model. They looked at updating the information that was generated in the FEMA model back in the 70s. So it did increase the precipitation data that's available. It increases land uses. It increases more detailed cross sections throughout the model. So it did provide a more accurate representation of what is occurring, and it also analyzes unsteady flow versus the FEMA was just steady flow analysis. The difference between steady and unsteady is basically the unsteady takes into account the attenuation that occurs with as the floodplain widens. You'll see flow reductions because some of the flow is actually filling the floodplain versus going in the river. So it is a more thorough analysis when you do it. One significant impact that to note is that the Army Corps model, the flows for the 100-year storm is approaching just over 5,500 CFS, whereas the FEMA model, based on the 1976 data, the flow is only 3,500 CFS. So based on the current information, there's a substantial increase in flow that's projected for the 100-year flood event versus what the FEMA initially did in 76. And then in the report, you can actually just an excerpt of the model with the various cross sections that we put in, and that's how we accurately represent the flow going through the downtown area through multiple cross sections. Again, we looked at the report identifies the various different options here, just kind of illustrating a cross section where we're physically removing the footer building and just kind of opens up the channel. I'm just scrolling down, and then here's a cross section that generally identifies that this is upstream of the Essex Street, and you can see we just illustrated that we put flood walls in, and we made all the flow within that channel to try to eliminate some of the diversion that occurs. And then the fourth option I noted was looking at the other improvements, but then that was looking at improving the cross-sectional area of the Millburn Avenue Bridge. Basically looking at the current arches that are there, widening it, eliminating the center pillar, and just opening up that channel and looking at those improvements. So look, basically there's a summary table that I just want to focus on at the moment. And I guess it's kind of, so we have the baseline, basically just models. It's all zero changes. But what this table illustrates is changes in flood elevations within the channel itself. So again, this is option one is just looking at the removal of the footer building. And what we found is that if we have it for the various storm events, and I'm just going to focus on the downstream. We remove it, and what occurs downstream. And what occurs is that we have a 1 foot drop actually in the flood elevations from the benefits of removing the footer building. But unfortunately, it really is just the low flows, the lower storms. The 10-year storm event is where we're seeing the most significant drop. We didn't see a more significant drop as we get into the larger storms, and that's primarily because the flows are so significant that even the Millburn Bridge, Avenue Bridge, is basically being inundated. And what we find is that removing the footer building, it just eliminates one constraint, but it just you're not eliminating the bridge constraint. So the constraint in flow just transfers from the footer building to the bridge itself. And then we start to see diminishing benefits after the Millburn Avenue Bridge. So we really didn't see much after the Millburn Avenue. Looking upstream, again, we're just seeing some minor improvements upstream of Essex Street Bridge. We did have a little anomaly here that's looking at for the 100-year, we're seeing an actual increase in elevation, and that just needs to be looked at in the model. A lot of times when you run these models, you will get some unusual, flows because we're ultimately changing the velocities and head losses that are occurring through the channel. And sometimes it just requires an additional cross section to more accurately represent what's happening. So, if we were to refine this model further, we would go in and just do some additional quality control on that. But it's not alarming. It's just something that has to be just looked at. So when we looked at the second option, where we're looking at the removing the footer building and then just increasing the channel, initially we were expecting that we would actually see a more significant increase in decrease in flood elevations, but in fact it didn't drop as much. And looking at the model, what was occurring is that, again, the model calculates this change in velocities and changes in the head losses, and it just, the impacts of the bridge ultimately was impacting the velocities in this area and how the flows were, were reacting. So it's when we dove into the model, it explained itself why it actually didn't see a more significant benefit from modifying that channel. And then we started to see some similar reductions and down upstream of the Futter building, and then downstream again, very little impacts again because of the Millburn Avenue Bridge. That's the next constraint that's holding flow back, and that's why we were seeing it. Option 3, we added the flood walls, and we really didn't see much significant impact from adding the flood walls. It didn't really change much in the elevations that we were observing. You're seeing the red numbers here because this is basically seeing the flow is not extending into the floodplain anymore. It's just focusing right into the channel itself. So that's why you see these red numbers here. And what the most significant benefit that we see that is option 4, where we're moving the Futter building, we widen the channel, we put the dikes, the flood walls in, and then also modified the Millburn Avenue Bridge. And that's where we were seeing some very substantial, downstream of the Futter building. We were refining elevations close to 2 feet in one location. So it's very significant impact from removing the Futter building and modifying the bridge. So we really saw the dikes. The dikes really didn't do much in this scenario. What we really found concluded is that there was really a significant benefit from removing the Futter building and improving the bridge. I know the bridge was improved fairly recent, but doing modifications to the bridge and by itself would not see any improvement because the Futter building is basically your constraint and restricting the flow. It's really modifying both of these together is where you see a significant drop in elevation and impacts. We did see some minimal impact over on the Taylor Park dam. And I think if this scenario was to be implemented, there may be some modification to the dam. That's some minor modifications just to make sure the attenuation within the lake mitigates any downstream impacts so that improvements can actually be done. So the conclusions, I already went through the conclusions, but I'll say the report just goes through the general options and just kind of concludes with what I said. So basically, that's what the study concluded, was that removing the Futter building, it certainly would be a positive flood mitigation measure. In the short term, it would be, you'd see benefits right away with the 10-year storm event. When the larger storms are just so large that it doesn't matter because it's the bridge are actually constraining the flows. But long term, if you were to remove the Futter building and then when they rehabilitate the bridge again, look at enlarging that bridge, that's where you would start to see some more significant improvements. The one thing that I did not model was if you're familiar with the Army Corps analysis, they were looking at modifications of the reservoir and trying to attenuate flow of that reservoir. That project alone would have some benefits because it does drop the flow from approximately 56 CFS down to about 4,000, and that basically drops the 100-year flow down to closer to a 25-year storm, between a 25 and a 50. So certainly if that project is done, Millburn will definitely see some benefits, and that actually makes doing work with the Futter building and doing work with the bridge even more beneficial in looking in the distance. That's the basic presentation. Any questions?
Questions from the committee?
Yes, hi, good evening. So if all of these changes happen, how does this, for instance, the little small white bridge, the first bridge coming into Taylor Park, how would that handle an increased flow? That's very low.
Yeah, that's very low, and we didn't see significant impacts on that bridge. Certainly, if you're looking at if the township wanted to move forward and actually go forward with removing the footer building, that we wouldn't see any impacts on that, because the flows, the bridge actually creates the next constraint. So that doesn't, you remove the footer building, you'll see some upstream benefits, but the downstream benefits you don't see until you modify the bridge. And modifying the bridge is something that you would look at that as a future. So that's when they rehabilitate the bridge in the next 20, 30 years. When they do that, that's the opportunity to looking at how you can further improve the downtown area. And then when you look at those improvements, you would look at those footbridge, you would look at the dam, and again, the impacts to the park, I would not anticipate to be substantial, that it would negatively impact the park itself and the features. But that would have to be looked at today exactly.
Right, because I believe the pond is what floods and then spreads out onto Main Street. But, I sat in a lot of those meetings with Cranford and Rawway about the flood mitigation, coming from the reservation. And everything was always talked about in cost benefit analysis. So to do all this, what is the cost benefit? This sounds like a multi-million-dollar, very disruptive project. Has that been talked about?
No, that wasn't part of our effort to look at do the cost benefit analysis. And you're right. Typically, that is done with every federal project. It's a criteria that they use for, and it is a good philosophy to be followed even from a municipal level. But we did not look at the benefits of the downtown by doing each one of these improvements. It wasn't part of our scope.
Well, I think that would be really important. This sounds like a tremendous project. So even an estimate of costs, and then of course with costs, what are the benefits? What are the detriments?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate. You really have to do that analysis. It requires, there's a very detailed process that FEMA has that you go through in order to calculate that benefit. And it's actually, you need to look at each individual structure and calculate the difference in elevation that each one of those structures. I think you would have to, we'd have to look at the cost of the footer building, of purchasing that, demoing it, and then are there enough benefits with that? The benefits, I would not expect it to be beneficial in the beginning, because it would just be by itself, because you're just looking at the 10-year storm event that occurs. You're not looking at the more higher 100-year flood elevation. So, I would question if that BCR is going to be above 1, basically, that the benefits outweigh the cost. That analysis would have to be done. And, if you were to just with the bridge, that would certainly be something to look at when the bridge needs to be rehabilitated. And if you're looking at the cost benefit of just the increasing cost for widening it versus just in 20, 30 years when they have to replace it, that replacement cost is there. So that's going to happen regardless. So if you look at the cost of just increasing and improving it, you may see a more positive benefit with that by just doing a little bit more, making it one continuous span versus having that pillar that requires, different type of infrastructure with the bridge itself. But that difference in cost between a replacement that is required versus enhancing it, that difference in cost may not be substantial, and you may see more positive benefits with that.
So as far as doing anything to the Millburn Avenue Bridge, you're not even talking about that as a...
I wouldn't think it's...
That's like a long
Yeah, I don't think it's something that the municipality wants to approach the county and say that you want to upgrade the bridge now. And when you're looking at a BCR ratio, that would be difficult to, that would be very substantial amount of money to modify that bridge at this point in time.
Oh, and one more last question. Did any of your analysis look at, and I know I've asked about this, I know it's difficult to get approval from the EPA to dredge Taylor Pond and make that as deep as it once was. I think it's about 20 or 30 feet of sediment in there, which is also a problem. But is that something we're not allowed to do? Are you familiar with that?
Well, I'm familiar, but I can say that dredging the pond without lowering the elevation, you're not going to see any real flood benefit from that, because the volume that you're dredging is just, it's ineffective volume. Basically, the water's there. You're not displacing that. With the flood water is flowing over the normal pool elevation. So from a flood mitigation perspective, dredging the pond, I wouldn't see any benefits unless you want to lower the normal water elevation.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to ask a couple questions. I want to continue on what Committeewoman Eglo was saying. If any of this is going to be actionable, by our committee, we would need a cost benefit analysis. And I don't know if this is something that we could request, Alex to see how expensive that would be. But I mean, the work, you did an extensive amount of work, but if any of this is going to be actionable, we as a committee member, we need numbers. We need to know, what our choices are, even if it's long term. And I mean, your work is very interesting, and I think it could really benefit the township. But it's almost like, give us some numbers so we might be able to build this into future budgets if it's something that we decided we wanted to pursue. So honestly, I'm a little, your work is great, but I'm a little disappointed that we don't have like kind of the meat on the bone here. So.
Yeah, no, I can fully appreciate that. For a decision to make, if you're going to purchase the Futter building, is there a cost benefit associated with that? And what we were tasked to do is the modeling portion, didn't ask to see what that benefit is. This, based on what we're observing, is that your benefit is really for a 10-year storm event. If off the cuff, I would think it's going to be marginal if we're going to, really demonstrate that that's going to be is it worth doing that additional exercise? I think it's going to, there's 50-50 chance that this is going to be actually a beneficial project. If we did this analysis and we were seeing much substantial benefits, then I would feel more confident in saying, yes, I think you should do the cost benefit analysis, because I think you're going to get a positive BCR. Based on the findings, I can't feel confident that it's definitely going to be a positive. We would have to do the analysis and see, based on the, I would have to represent it as minimal benefit. The minimal benefit is for a 100-year storm. It's not for larger storm events. And the fact that it's for a lower storm event, you don't have the buildings are not being inundated as much. And the fact the buildings aren't being inundated, you're not, that's where your cost of your benefit comes from. So again, I would think that you're not going to see a substantial benefit if the impact is just removing the Futter building for a 10-year storm.
So in layman's terms, what your findings are that there'd be a minimal benefit, if we did all these things, unless there was a 100-year storm blown in.
I'm saying that there's, my expectation is that that it would be, if there is a positive, I don't believe that, I don't feel very confident that, this is definitely going to be a positive BCR which justifies the building. I can just say that you know, the benefits that we're seeing is really for a smaller storm event, which indicates to me that the benefits are not going to be significant. You know, I can see that if we were seeing benefits at a larger storm event means that the flood elevation is much higher, meaning that more buildings are being inundated, and once a building is being inundated, if we can eliminate that inundation of a building, that's where your benefits are. So, you know, just this analysis basically is showing us that the benefits are not going to be substantial because you're looking at benefits from a lower storm event.
I guess, John, while you're on that 10-year, what does it look like, a 10-year flood event? What can, like, was that just the park flooding? Was that just Millburn Avenue? Like, what did that, like, to the layman, what did that physically look like?
You probably have, I don't have the exact elevations, but you're inundating the channel is starting to overflow.
But no damage.
Excuse me?
No damage to buildings or
I'm sure that there's minimal flooding at that point. I don't suspect there's a substantial flooding, but you would start to see some minimal flooding at that point.
So if I may, part of the process here was to take an initial look at some options, potential options, and not necessarily dive into a full-scale analysis if there wasn't a significant amount of benefit to any one of those options. And in particular, having one of those options be the county, and sort of one of the best options to see a benefit being the county's bridge. I think it offers some significant hurdles when you're talking about this. So so there's kind of two parts to this. So this was sort of part number one, but the other part of it was, as everyone knows, there's a flood area map of the downtown from FEMA, which sort of shows where these floodwaters would go in the event of a storm. And so, you know, sort of seeing whether you have the ability to lower those floodwaters, but also I think, and we've just briefly spoke about this with John and Martha, is that, you know, understanding how, like, for instance, the FEMA flood map shows that floodwaters will touch the corner of Town Hall. Now, anybody that's been around long enough in Millburn knows that during Irene and during Floyd, those waters never got close to Town Hall. And so the idea here too is that, do we also take a look at how the FEMA flood map, which I believe is still from the 70s, John, is that correct?
Correct.
Whether there are things that have changed in that may impact the way that the downtown is mapped when it comes to FEMA. And so that's sort of the, you know, I'd mentioned there would be an additional sort of request at the end of this too, because in this regard, you know, I think, as John was saying, there's not necessarily a significant BCR benefit to what's being presented here, but there may be sort of in this step 2 a benefit in identifying whether the FEMA flood maps are still accurate and whether there's anything different about the way in the river and the flow and different things that would adjust that map in any way. And so, in order to do that, we need a bit of topographical surveying done in the downtown, and was just looking that, you know, for the committee to see if there was any, you know, interest or consensus to move forward with that part of this, to see if there's any potential adjustment or what would be a request for adjustment. I don't want to say that it would be an automatic adjustment to the FEMA map, but based on sort of another, and I think you're calling that a 2D analysis, John? Yeah.
Certainly we can. I just recently did an assignment for the town of Dover. They asked us to do a map amendment of their downtown because their specific concern was impacts associated with the floodway. We were able to model that the floodway was not as extensive as FEMA modeled it, and we actually opened up several properties out of the floodway that they were targeting for redevelopment. So, certainly there is benefits of looking at the dated FEMA map and looking at that for the residents that are paying that flood insurance that don't necessarily need it. And so that certainly is a benefit associated with that.
Right. Or when they make modifications to their buildings, they have to go above a flood level that they may not have ever seen a flood at their building. Right. Right. So I think, so that's sort of that would be the idea behind doing a little bit of additional survey work that John would then be able to piggyback into a separate 2D analysis of the floodway and the flood and the FEMA flood map. So if the committee is okay with going down that road, and there's consensus, we'll go that route in terms of just a little bit more topographical survey work, which would be under 10,000, and then I would come to the committee with the proposal from Mott for that additional work.
So you're saying that to do the extra survey, it would cost up to...
Correct.
I didn't hear what the question was.
Whether there was consensus to go forward with...
No, what somebody spoke after you did.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, clarifying what it would cost, to do the next survey, and Alex said that it would be under 10.
Under 10, right? That's what he said.
Yeah.
So I, for one, think it's a good idea. I think it's probably due for such a thing.
I would also like to consult Martha Callahan, our engineer, what her thoughts are about the validity.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think the 2D analysis I've spoken with John, and this is more up to date than the previous model that he was using. And this will actually more accurately reflect what the floodwaters in our downtown really do, because they don't necessarily stay and follow the channel and just flow out to the sides and into the floodplain area. They take different routes. And that's what this additional topography information that we would need about $9,000 or $10,000 to gather that topo information. With that information, they would be able to more accurately model what truly happens in the downtown. And if it's significant enough, it could affect our FEMA mapping. And like John said, some of our properties that are shown to be in a flood zone right now, and they have to take extra measures, they may be like totally taken out of a flood zone, depending on, how significant these changes could be or what they could show. So I would be all for going ahead with this more accurate analysis.
Do we have consensus from the committee?
Wait.
Did you want to take any questions?
Yes, we could. Mr. Futter, you could please come to the microphone for a question.
Hi, my name is Richard Footer. I'm familiar with that building. I'm familiar with that bridge. And I'm familiar with the waterway. Could you tell me, do you know the publication date of the Army Corps report that you referenced?
The exact date, when they,
2015.
it was completed within the last 5 years.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. I was around for this. In 1968, there was a flood. It was the last flood before the riverbed was concrete lined. It became concrete lined because the Army Corps did a flood study report for the Rollway River and concentrated on the downtown. And in that report, it came right out and said that the removal of the footer building, this is not a defense, this is a fact, that removal of the footer building would provide absolutely no difference. But it also came out and said that they recommended underground piping from the Essex Street Bridge straight out to Taylor Park. And in that report, they did not refer to the park having a pond. They referred to it as a retention basin. I never brought this up. I never pushed for it, because in order to do that, it would take the basement and corner of the building, which is now the bagel shop. It would go through and across Millburn Avenue through the parking lot, and it would probably take the rear corner and basement part of the deli. I just could not see putting the downtown through that type of construction, even though it would have been better for me to go ahead and do that. Also, the Millburn Avenue Bridge. You may not be aware that they had originally scheduled the bridge and we delayed them for a year or so. A few of us, not you, put them off. And originally, the original bridge had 4 culverts. And I can tell you that our building never got touched by any water until the culverts got jammed up with trees that came down from the reservation. When the county came in and was designing the bridge, Tim Gordon allowed me to attend a couple of county meetings. And at that meeting, I said, if you're going to redo this bridge, why do you have to have any culverts? First thing he said was, or they said was, that in order to do that, the decking would have to be lower to bear the weight of the span. And they also said that the DEP would not allow any more flow going through than what is already there. I had a question that they never would answer. When the original Army Corps report came out and Killam and Killam did the project, and I believe Mcdonald is a morph from the original Killam and Killam, they did the work. At the time, Mr. Giroux was the engineer and Tony Isaacs was the assistant. Well, they didn't come out and take out 3 feet of dirt. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much, but they did not take out 3 feet of dirt and then pour 3 feet of concrete. My father stood at approximately 6'1". When he used to go underneath the building, why he kept doing that, I don't know, but he could reach up. And after they poured the concrete, no, not anymore. So whoever did the work actually reduced the amount of CFM that was going under the building and through the bridge. Next, you could take away the building and you could redo the bridge, but you're still going to have the same problem. That river is not the original river bed. That water, when it comes down in that direction, water does not like to do S-turns. It hits the corner of Rutter's building, which is the sushi place, fills up that culvert, and then backs up in whirlpools. But the culvert that's right up against our building, even during Irene, even during Floyd, was empty, partially empty. The Army Corps of Engineer report that I'm referring to gave an example of how to mitigate the flooding. But I've talked to hydraulic engineers and every one of them said, and I'd like to hear what you think, in order to control water, you do it at its source. What do you think about that?
Okay, well, I guess, I can't speak to, an Army Corps report that was done in 68 and how applicable that is today. If it was done in 68, it didn't even account for the updated survey that was done in I believe 74. So I don't know what modeling was done prior to 74. Killam Associates, I work for Killam Associates. They were, affiliated with Mcdonald. I've worked with Leo Coakley for many years, who actually did the 74 analysis. And so I'm familiar with that. But again, regarding what the Army Corps recommended in 68, does not necessarily reflect what is today and meeting today's regulations, meeting today's flows, which is based on the watershed being developed significantly more from 68 to today. So I can only analyze and look at projections of what are the conditions today and meeting current regulations, what improvements we can do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, I was about to answer your next question regarding, watershed management. Certainly, that is you are looking at, a watershed that makes up several municipalities. And it is something that is difficult to regulate as a regional, watershed organization where the stormwater is regulated on a regional basis. That would certainly be beneficial for people, but that's not in place today, and it's not something that we can speak of as being a way to mitigate it at this point in time.
would you by any chance have access to the Army Corps report from, say, I think it was published in 72?
Yeah, I think I can track it down. It's gonna go through some archives, but I might be able to track it down.
I would like another copy of that. The last copy I had, I copied and gave it to Dan Baer. He has seen it. And there were other people within these walls over the past decades that were aware of it. Actually were quite curious as to why I never tried to push for that. And the reason why, cost benefit, just didn't make sense to do that. Why put my neighbors, out of business, and why put all of downtown with that construction? But getting back to this, I feel that original report was probably more on the money of how to have a cure for the flooding, but it would turn Taylor Park into a retention basin, as Diane Eglow was mentioning, to dredge it, to hold the water, because I know that the municipalities downstream are not going to appreciate, and I don't think the DEP is going to allow for additional flow. My question is, if they poured, and if you have access to the original elevations before it was concrete lined, and if you could see that that's different, wouldn't the answer be to the downstream communities to increase the CFM by dredging out that concrete and reducing the height of it?
Okay, Mr. Futter, I just want to say that Alex and I sit on a joint union Essex County task force that is looking at all of this and looking at upstream storage. So I think that to look at this as a microcosm without looking at the upstream
I'm aware.
storage
Thank you.
is not necessarily the whole picture. So I will
Okay.
respectfully, let's see what happens with our partners and our neighbors in Essex County as we address the Orange Reservoir, and hopefully we'll have some resolution that can be connected to all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say to Mr. Footer, since this whole report kept talking about his building, his building, his building.
Yeah,
I think-
I haven't heard my name so many times.
So I think it was nice, and Mr. Footer said gracious to let him speak. So maybe if you do have additional questions, you could meet with Alex and John privately to allay your concerns. I think that would be
Anytime.
fair.
I just want you to know, for decades,
Yeah.
I have a very close friend who used to be a stock boy in the store. For decades, every time they predicted a heavy rain, we camped out overnight. We got to see where the first drop came over, and we got to see that nothing was touching the building, but we did get to see, and there was one flood, one of the big ones, that there was a tree, a couple of trees that blocked up the openings. We called the fire department. They came, they turned, they looked at me and they said, Rich, we can't help you. There's just too much static pressure. We'll get killed going down there. So I've seen it. I mean, it's not like I'm just trying to come up with the fences or whatever.
You've lived it every day.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just, Jeff Feld, I just have two brief questions, because I think we had to do the topological survey, because I think it ties into maybe inclusionary zoning and redevelopment, because that's what he said he did a report for in Dover. But when we talk about this survey, what's going to be the scope of the survey? You know, how far are we going down Main Street? Are we going down to Annie Says? Are we going up to the dump? Or are we just focusing like we're like footers and Millburn? I just want to make sure everyone understands where we are, that it's just geared for that part. It's not looking for whether other areas could be redeveloped, because that's what he said the purpose was for his redevelopment plan in Dover, to make sure certain parcels were redeveloped. And the question may be, if we were going to expand the scope, what would be the additional cost to do that? Because I think that might play into the litigation that we're in. And if we do that, just to go where the cost is and where the money's coming to pay for it.
Well, I think the simple answer there, Mr. Feld, is that you're looking at the area which is currently impacted by the floodplain.
Maybe for a layman, I mean,
That's
the
that
floodplain.
Main Street, you know, the area outside of, so there's floodplain and there's floodway. And John, you can speak to this a little bit, but our original scope was between Taylor Park and the train trestle at the Cal Path, the library.
Correct.
Right. And then,
All right,
So
so I'm just
not-
trying to figure out the scope, was,
So not South Mountain section, not Main Washington section.
all right. I just want everyone to understand when we talk about the scope,
Right.
because when we did have floods in the hurricanes, flooded out a lot of parts of Main Street, up to the Lackawanna. So everyone's trying to figure out where we're talking about the scope of this report.
Now, the focus isn't localized flooding. It's flooding in the river itself. It's the river floodplain is what we would be focusing on.
And when will we have the, when will we have it if we approve it?
I think we'd have to go back and look at the aerial company that was going to supply it and see when they can deliver it. And then I'll work with Alex in preparing a proposal for, to do the analysis.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you for your time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Good night. Good night.
Good night.
thanks, John. Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Martha. Are there any resolution 20-200 best practices? Right?
Yes, I'm to give a
Yes.
brief report to
Yes.
the Township Committee in a public meeting. So as you may know, the state puts out a list of best practices, core competencies, and some unscored survey questions each year that the township is required to answer. More recently, these have been tied to a municipality's receipt of state aid. And I am happy to report that in this year's survey of the 29 scored survey questions, or best practices and core competencies, the township answered 26 in the affirmative, with 3 not applicable, which puts us well above the 16 required to receive 100% of our state aid. And again, yeah, so those questions, range from making sure that there are 3 years worth of financials and budgets on the township's website, making sure that that we, kind of goes along with, there's an annual review of fees collected and things like that. But there are again 29 questions that are usually developed each year, and sometimes it changes, sometimes it stays the same from the state. If there's any questions from the committee, I'm happy to answer.
Does the committee have any questions with respect to?
No, I
No?
move it if you'd like
Okay.
me to.
Yep.
Okay.
Cheryl, any questions? Ms. Burstein? You're muted.
She's saying.
Still, yep, I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay.
No question.
May I have a motion to approve Resolution 20-20?
So moved.
May I have a second? Second. Roll call, please.
Ms. Burstein? Ms.
Cheryl, your mic.
Sorry,
Sorry.
Ms.
Your
Saul
mic-
Eglo?
Sorry about that. Yes, okay.
Yes for Diane.
Thank you. Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Lieberberg?
Yes.
Thank you.
The committee will now consider consent agenda resolutions 20-201 through 20-208.
No, 207 is separate.
Yeah, 201 to 206.
Stand correction. To 20
Through 206, right?
Yeah, 207 is separate.
It does include 2-208 though. It not include 20-207 is separate.
Yes, so 20-201 through 20-206, as well as 20-208.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Okay,
Thank you.
hold on.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So I see that we have to reject the bid for the Short Hills westbound train barrier, blah, blah, blah. Are we going to be putting that back out?
Yes. So that bit. So what this project is a ramp on the westbound side of the train station. We are using CDBG grant money from the county, which is federal money passed through the county for barrier-free access. However, there was an item in that bid that turned out to be far too expensive, which will be removed from the bid and it will be rebid.
Fabulous.
May I have a motion
And
to approve this? Oh, public comment. Yes.
Thank you again, Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane, Short Hills, New Jersey. Now, I just want to make sure, because there's public comments twice, do you want these public comments limited to the consent agenda? I just want everyone to
Correct.
understand the
Yes.
rules that we're applying tonight. One, on the consent agenda, this goes back to a concern I've been raising for the last, I guess, 2 months. How can we really give comments? Because we really don't have prior access except for like 3 hours to documents. As to the bill list, we need to have I've sent you a letter. I think we need to have more transparency as to the items. I don't need to go into it. It's set forth in my letter. As to 208, it's not even included in the draft packet, so I don't even know how we can give a comment on a resolution that the public can't even look at. But the key is, it goes really to 207, that we had to have at least 48 hours access to give comments, because the comments I'm giving you on the bill list is just a blank, it's a lump sum. I have no idea what's included in that. This is a comment I've been giving for about 2 months, and I think you need to look into that. But again, 208, it's not even in the packet.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to add a public comment? No, we go to the.
Okay. No, I think we should just ask them to lower their hands until the public comment portion. If they don't wish to comment on the consent agenda items, they should lower their hands on Zoom.
So this is 208.
No, 208. Just so everyone knows, 208 is for authorizing the township committee to go into closed session.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess. It just would just say
Yes.
if they're not commenting on this.
Members of the public, the public comment is now for the consent agenda items only.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Dominique, the time for public comment is for the consent agenda items only. If you have general public comment, that will be later in the meeting.
Okay, when in the meeting, so I know.
After after old business and new business.
Okay, I'll wait. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is David Cosgrove, 99 Oakview. I had a question on 208. And the question is, there's no description what it is about. What is it about? Who are we paying money to? And for what?
208.
20-208.
20-208 is to approve the closed session for personnel for professional service contracts for 2021.
So I'm curious, what are the professional service contracts?
Closed session, Mr. Cosgrove.
Yes? Can you hear me?
It was.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, it was the two that were an RFP request for the town planner and for our legal counsel.
And that's all we're going to know about that?
Yes, sir.
That's the only question I have on that one. I do have a question on the 207, which I'll ask later. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it? That's it. Okay. Resolution 20-207.
You have to approve
No.
Okay, sorry.
the consent agenda.
May I have a motion to approve resolution 20-201 through resolution 20-208?
No, 206 and 208.
206 and 20-201 through 20-206 and resolution 20-208, which are listed on the consent agenda item.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Burstein,
Yes.
Ms. Stahl-Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Lieberberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is resolution 20-207. And this is establishing standard procedures and requirements for public comments made during a remote public meeting, as well as public comments submitted in writing ahead of the remote public meeting in accordance with New Jersey AC 5:39-1.
It's a resolution, so
Yes.
you're looking for a motion on the resolution?
Well, I was going to have Mr. Falcon explain it first. Thank you.
Briefly, I just want to indicate that toward the end of last month, the local finance board came out with new guidance concerning additional standards and procedures which are to be followed by municipalities in connection with the holding of remote meetings. They had done a considerable amount of guidance in the early spring, in March and April with respect to this. There's been some further thought, and they now have identified 3 particular topics on which they want the municipalities to act. The first is for the making of public comments during a remote public meeting. Second, for the making of public comments submitted in writing ahead of a remote meeting. And third, for establishing standards of conduct to be followed by members of the public when making comments. They have promulgated a requirement that the resolution be adopted to now follow those procedures, and that's what this does for you this evening. It set forth the state you will, through the adoption of this resolution, be in compliance with the requirements of those guidance documents and the New Jersey Administrative Code to address them through a resolution.
May I ask for clarification, Kit?
Sure.
So that means if somebody, I believe at one of these last meetings, the mayor and deputy mayor said we cannot read letters from people. Does this mean now we can?
Yeah, this is a new wrinkle, a new development in the, as a result of the pandemic and remote meetings, that there will be a provision, and there is a provision in this resolution, providing for the submittal of a written document prior to the meeting in accordance with the schedule, and those can be read, presumably by the clerk or whoever's presiding. They'll have to be letters or documents of a length so as to fit within the 3 minutes that would be applicable were they here present and standing at the podium, but that will be permitted, yes.
Is it permitted or required?
That's required.
It's required that we, if somebody submits a letter, and if it's either to all of us, the clerk would have to read the letter out loud into the record.
Unless there's a limitation.
Okay.
If you get a lot of letters on the same subject, the clerk eliminates duplicative letters. They would be noted that a letter was received from so-and-so, but the reading would take place as to the main, topic if there were a number of letters on the same topic. Not every letter would have to be repeated.
And Kit, that's for the clerk to read? I mean, that's not, is that something that we should?
You would decide that, but it could be the clerk or the presiding officer.
And would the length correspond with the 3-minute?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it would.
So I guess this has a good side and a bad side like everything else. If there's 10 letters on the same subject, but they're not all written exactly the same, how does one person decide which of the one letter is read? And with the other 9 people say, wait, why wasn't my letter read? I mean, this opens up an interesting quandary.
Yes. Well, Mr. McDonald and your planning board attorney are on the league committee, I believe, that's analyzing these issues. And that's exactly one of the items that's brought up. The clerks are going to be tearing their hair out. What do you mean I've got to go through 40 letters and figure out which are duplicate and which are not? There is a requirement that if it is in the main duplicative, but there is some separate little differentiated point, that the clerk has to make a determination as to whether, well, at least that portion ought to be shared with everybody. But it's going to be a real headache. It's it's like all of these things. I shouldn't say all of these things. The people who develop the regulations aren't always acquainted with the realities of what occurs at a public meeting. Nevertheless, over time, during the balance of this pandemic, we will figure out how to deal with the requirements and do the best we can and live in accordance with the letter and spirit of the requirement.
And maybe we can encourage people to take their 3 minutes on Zoom or 1 minute on Zoom, and I don't know.
Are there any other comments from the committee with respect to resolution 20-207?
So just another question. So I guess the reading of the comments would occur at the end of the public session, because it is possible that somebody who submitted a letter will then get up and, make their statement.
Right, good point.
Right.
I can't hear what's being said.
They will already have had their say. You don't get 6 minutes, you get 3 minutes on the board.
or like Cheryl said, you've chosen to speak instead of your letter. I don't know. You're gonna have to someone have to sort that out, Alex.
Yeah, unfortunately, Alex is in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I suspect there would have to be certain time limits that would apply, that, you know, letters can be received up to a certain.
Yes,
Right,
there'll be
yeah.
a schedule.
Yes.
Well, I mean, look, and I'll just speak to this a bit, is that some of the concern behind this is that, one, you're asking individuals who are not speaking those words to speak those words to either the public or the committee. But also, there's concern over the particular cadence of somebody speaking or the ability to get through a document in the fashion that that individual who wrote it may have been able to get through it. And so there are some concerns about how this is done. So to Committeewoman Eglow's point, I think, yes, we encourage everyone to participate via Zoom or in person, but certainly that is an option. Cool. There you go. Any comments?
May I have a motion to approve resolution? Did you have a comment, Mr. Feld?
This is not a comment time, is it?
Yes,
No.
there,
Yeah.
I speak,
On
there's,
consent agenda,
there's-
is it a continuation?
there's three different aspects of the meeting.
My question is this a continuation of public comment just on a consent agenda item? Just that it happened to
This
be
is not a consent agenda.
This is not consent agenda.
consent agenda,
No,
okay.
no,
It's
it
a
is not a
resolution.
consent agenda.
The public has to
Thank
be
you.
able to speak
There will
on-
be an opportunity, Mr. Feld.
before you
later.
vote on it. Where there's litigation about this, I think you should listen to me because I gave you citations to the local finance board meeting in August when I spoke to the executive director, where she gave what the basis of the
Jackie.
local finance notice. I'm trying to give you the benefit of my
Mr.
knowledge
Feld,
and my experience.
Mr. Feld,
If you don't want to take
Mr.
it,
Feld, thank you. May I have a motion to approve resolution 20-207?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Burstein,
Yes.
Ms. Stahl Eglo,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserman,
Yes.
Mayor Lieberberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
So before we look at this next ordinance, I'd like to get a little bit of consensus and a little bit of understanding from my fellow committee members. An ordinance to discuss short-term rentals was first discussed back in 2009 when it became apparent that some residents were dealing with homes that were being rented out by absentee owners. Some residents who are currently engaged in short-term rentals cited the benefits of additional income, gratifying experiences of meeting new people, and the absence of any safety concerns. I'd like to just speak to Ms. Eglo and Ms. Burstein initially, and then Mr. Wasserman, what their thoughts are about this ordinance before we proceed.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Did you mean 2019, Jackie?
Yes.
2019, not 2009.
No, I'm sorry, 2019.
Yeah, so I think how this came about is you and I were at our Atlantic City League of Municipalities, and we happened upon one of the 300 booths, and you saw that there was a company that shows what how many Airbnbs or VBOs, whatever, are in towns. And you were like, oh, wow, how many are in Millburn? And the number came up like 20 or 32, I can't remember. And I think you've kind of had this on your radar that this is something that should be stopped in Millburn. And you had one cited that you felt that they were dangerous, that you want to know who's in your neighbors' houses. And I believe I've had this discussion with you, I don't know, publicly or privately also, that, I don't believe that this is like a threatening thing in town. And I don't believe that there was 2 houses, and the problems with those houses, what they were compliance, Dave Cuomo, what is he? There were code enforcement issues. There weren't an issue with somebody renting out their 1 bedroom. And I don't really know, talking about the cost benefit ratio again, it's not supposed to be a profit motivation to make people get permits. And I just don't personally feel that there have been dangerous or horrific issues in town with Airbnbs, except those 2 houses which were shut down with code enforcement. And I think to put somebody through the expense of getting a permit and having town hall, I'm sorry, I loosened my mask and now it's falling off. Having our people from town hall go out and do these inspections for the benefit of what? There have not been any dangerous, there's not been murders. And I think I even said if there've been more unfortunate instances from Ubers, Uber driving, people getting hurt. So I am not in favor of this. I don't see the need. I don't see the cost benefit. I don't see putting our town hall employees through this. So I've never been for this, and I've been very, very clear on that. So I think that speaks to my opinion.
Ms. Burstein?
So I understand what Diane's saying. I think the enforcement is a real problem, but we're not having enforcement. I don't think we should have Airbnbs at all in town. But that being said, I'd rather have some limitation on it, meaning if people aren't home, they shouldn't be renting out their house. And that's really what this is. I think at the end of the day, that's the gist of this. So I will support it.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Ms. Burstein says. We're living in a COVID. We're living in COVID. We don't know. We don't know our circumstance in the next few months, and I think some regulation is protective of the township, even though we're in a little bit of uncharted territory here. And I'm very concerned that our residents that are trying to make ends meet. I'm very concerned that people can do this within reason. But I think some regulation here is pertinent. I think it's smart, and I would be in favor. I'd be in favor of doing this, and we can, I think we can review this. We can review this in a year, and let's make sure that we're doing it right. But I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Well, I think everyone knows my concern for this. I think this ordinance really addresses and marries both issues. It forbids whole house rentals, allows only for owner-occupied short-term rentals. It's up to 2 bedrooms, a maximum of 4 adults. It's up to 60 days in a calendar year, no more than 28 consecutive days at a time. And the annual permit fee is $250, which will allow the township to have the requisite inspections for fire, code safety, and the potential enforcement issues to ensure compliance. And I also believe this will protect our local neighborhoods by knowing which homes have licenses. So at this time, ordinance 2565-20, I present for consideration an ordinance 2565-20. This is the ordinance to amend and supplement Article 4 of the Municipal Code of the Township to provide for the licensing and regulations of short-term rentals in owner-occupied dwellings. The purpose of this ordinance is to provide regulations for the licensing and occupation of short-term rentals within the Township of Millburn. You've heard my brief statement about the ordinance. Tonight is the time set for the public hearing and final passage as advertised in accordance with the law. I declare the hearing now open. If you are attending remotely, please press *6 and raise your hand so you can be identified and acknowledged. Thank you.
BPM, you're on. Do you have something to say about this hearing?
Hi there.
Hello?
Hi.
You don't have to scream.
I'm sorry, Cheryl.
That's okay.
It's Perry.
Harry, we're discussing the ordinance 2565. So this is public comment only with respect to that ordinance.
Okay, I
Public comment will be a little bit later in the meeting.
Okay, I just actually had a comment about the previous, when you had closed session and you're talking about public comments and how they'll be heard and read and, you know, if the letters are in advance. I just would like to elaborate.
Harry, you'll have to discuss this later. The public comment section now is only with respect to 2565-20.
I respect you, Matt.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, this is David Cosgrove, 99 Oakview. I had my hand raised to comment on 20-207 and no one unmuted me or you passed it over. I'm trying to find out what happened.
That's part of public comment. At the end of the session, that's not, there was no public comment with respect to the resolution.
So it's been passed. So is there any sense in making a comment at all?
Make a public comment at the end, Mr. Cosgrove.
Was there supposed to be public comment?
No, there was not.
All right.
That's it. Anybody else, Jimmy? That's it. I move that this public hearing be closed and the ordinance be adopted on final reading and the township clerk be directed to publish the ordinance by title as passed on final reading in accordance with law. May I have a second, please?
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Ms. Burstein?
Yes.
Ms. Saul Eglow?
No.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes.
Mayor Lieberberg?
Yes. Yep. Okay. Old business. Hold on.
There's a zoning ordinance that's a companion to this.
Yes.
The zoning ordinance will make this a permitted use under the zoning code now that this ordinance has been passed, and that you can also put on your agenda for November 10th.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Falcon. The Human Relations Committee. As I mentioned at our last meeting on October 6th, I'm continuing to gather information on the structure and composition of a variety of human relations committees that exist in our local municipalities, as well as other kinds of organizations that address the issues of racial prejudice, discrimination, equity, and inclusion. Some organizations are hand-selected by the mayor or the township committee. Some are residents only. Some have Board of Ed, police, business owners, students. Some have bankers and real estate representatives. The missions of these ordinances from the local towns are similar in nature, addressing inclusion, culture of respect, make recommendations to the governing bodies regarding the development of policies, procedures, educational programs, and generally act in an advisory capacity funded by the town with a preliminary budget. South Orange Maplewood has a different framework where they have several 501c3 entities that are focused on specific issues of race, inequity in schools, anti-bias training. Some of their focus is community engagement, marketing communications, residential integration, and demographic research. I have had and will continue to have calls with other mayors, the Millburn Short Hills Anti-Racism Task Force, the Chinese and Indian communities, as well as our clergy. I've reached out to moderators who are nationally renowned for their expertise in this area, including Factuality and Beth Zemsky. Next week, I will attend the West Orange monthly meeting of their Human Relations Committee on Monday night. I will be meeting with the Summit Mayor. Today, I spoke with the Westfield Mayor that has recently established a committee within the last year. We will continue to discuss this, and hopefully at the next TC meeting, I will have more concrete information for further discussion regarding a mission statement and perhaps looking at ways to populate this committee. And I welcome your input. If anybody wants to join me on any of these calls or meetings, please let me know. Thank you. Does any other member of the committee have any old business to discuss?
None for me.
No.
Ms. Burstein, do you have any?
No, thank you.
Okay.
But I just want to thank you for your hard work on what you're doing for the human, whatever you call it. But I do appreciate how much you're doing.
It certainly has been an education.
And I would say the same thing. I see you on the phone all the time trying to get all this information together, and it's well appreciated.
Thank you. New business. I see Mr. McDonald, you're going to discuss this zoning map for us. Please.
Yes. So in an effort to update things that are old, we have embarked upon an update to the zoning map. Some of you may have seen our zoning map that is sort of this outdated, not outdated, but faded and very hard to read document. And so we've gone and redone our zoning map in color. Everyone can see it here. So we wanted to present that to the township committee prior to, this has to be adopted by ordinance. And so we want to make sure that you've seen it, that you've had the ability to ask any questions regarding it in terms of, how it's laid out. Certainly this is something that, may change every so often. However, it should not be a frequent changing document, and this will be a lot easier for our residents to navigate, and also will be a layer added to our spatial data logic portal. For those residents that are unaware of that, it can be found on our website. It's a very useful tool for everybody, but certainly wanted to present this to the committee, and then in a subsequent meeting have this on as an ordinance for approval.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
So there's no zone changes in here, is there?
There are only zone changes that have been approved.
No proposed zone changes. Okay.
Correct.
And when you say residential and a square footage, that is the minimum square footage of the lot, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And once it's online, Alex, people can zoom in because I can still even barely read this with my glasses.
Yes, it'll be a layer on the SDL portal, but also which gives you the ability to zoom into a particular area. Also, it'll be a PDF document, which will give you the ability to enlarge it. Yes.
Great.
So this will be on for November 10th?
Correct.
Great. Does any committee member have any other item of new business to address?
Well, I guess I have a question for you, Mayor. So I didn't know you were moving public comment to the end of the meeting, so I just guess I'd like to know what the change is for. And I don't think people who have been zooming in tonight expected that. I didn't expect it, so I guess I want to ask why.
It used to be at the end of the meeting, and it, I believe, makes for a more cohesive meeting that can be moved along more succinctly. And the purpose is now to have public comment so that we have already completed our business functionality, and now we can hear from the public.
I think some members might feel frustrated that they don't get to speak until we have concluded our business, which is why, admittedly, I did move it when I was mayor, because I felt that it worked out very well last year, but the world certainly has changed. So.
But it's clearly on the agenda that it was at the end of the meeting, and it does enable us to get our business done.
I don't know.
Public comment. When invited to speak, please come to the lectern. Clearly state your name and address and speak loudly so your comments may be understood and properly recorded. Whenever an audience or committee member reads from a prepared statement, please email a copy to the Township Clerk's office at townclerk@millburntwp.org. To facilitate an orderly meeting and permit all to be heard, speakers are asked to limit their comments to 1 3-minute session. You will be prompted when there are 30 seconds remaining. This is a business meeting, and please address professionals or staff directly, and please direct all comments to me. Each individual will be given 1 opportunity to make their public comment. Please be patient, and we will address each member of the public that wishes to speak. The public comment period is now open.
Again, my name is Jeffrey Feld, 11 Alexander Lane. I would like to know if the committee received an opinion that the public was not allowed to speak on resolution, a non-consent agenda item today, which was resolution 20-207, that you adopted something that affects our rights to speak before you take public action. You did not allow us to speak. As I was trying to explain, there are 3 times when the public, or maybe now 4 times when the public should be allowed to speak. Before you take official action that's on the agenda, based on an ordinance, and then when people want to talk about things that are not listed on the agenda. Tonight, you deprived the public an opportunity to talk about an item before you took action. There's some questions I have about that resolution. In my letter that I gave to you before, I told you to look at the Middlesex County, what they've done for virtual action. They talk about 3 different things that are supposed to happen. When you have an ordinance, when people ask questions, the public's supposed to get a response before you vote. I tell you to look at what you're doing. And I think the public needs to know, because the world has changed dramatically since the last meeting. This afternoon, a Newark councilman was federally indicted. On last Wednesday, a person pled guilty, implicated the former business administrator of Orange. Things are happening. When we talk about the time where we're supposed to get comments, it was 10 p.m. on the Monday before your meeting. How are we supposed to give comments if you don't post your agenda till like 11:42 in the morning? Most people are at work. How are they going to give comments? And there's a question I think you need to get an opinion from your municipal council. Why we don't follow the pattern of Newark, Orange, the Essex County Board of Freeholders, where they post their agenda on the Friday before, and they have a link to the items that you're going to vote on. Why do we? And also there's a question, when you look at your agenda, approval of agenda, that's a comment that usually you get because of the Robert rules. But the Open Public Meetings Act controls there's action. Your agenda is basically to be finalized on Friday, posted up, and then by 10 o'clock on Monday at midnight, 10 o'clock at night, the public will be able to give you the comments. And I also suggest that you maybe, if people give questions, post the questions on a public website so other people know what other people are asking. That's the real issue, but you need to focus on what's happening. Look at what other municipalities are doing. Tonight, you've frustrated and violated, impaired, and bridged the rights of people to speak on action before you took official action.
Yes, please. Thank you, Jimmy. Ms. Urso, please unmute your phone so we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is David Cosgrove, 99 Oakview. I joined in the last gentleman's comment, particularly on 20-207. And I had wished, or had hoped you'd hear from me before you passed that. But nonetheless, here's the problem I have. The agendas that you folks post give basically no information about what's going to happen at the meeting. An example tonight is this the 2207 itself, as well as the zoning map, which is all it was referred to that was mentioned by Mr. Mcdonald a moment ago. So if you folks are going to set a 10 p.m. Monday night deadline to submit a written statement or a question, no one's going to have any of the backup information or even close to the backup information to be able to make an appropriate statement by 10 o'clock on a Monday night when you folks hide or refuse to disclose the materials until the afternoon. I've also looked at some of the agendas from township committees in neighboring towns, because you folks always like to compare us to neighboring towns, and they give much more information than this town, which leads me to believe, or leads me to the conclusion, the sole conclusion, is that you folks don't want to hear from residents. And that's why you keep all this stuff secret. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Cosgrove. Ms. Pasternak, please unmute your phone.
I think I have.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Jean Pasternak, 342 Hobart Avenue. I too would like to echo the previous two commentators. I believe that the steps being taken are meant to chill our speech and prevent people from feeling welcome to provide commentary, given the new scenario where technology is involved, as well as contentious items that are coming before the township committee. There are comments, there are differing points of view, they need to be heard, and they need to be heard fairly. The second comment I'd like to make is, as with respect to the Human Relations Committee, I see that there's a lot of work going into this, and it is appreciated, Jackie, but I hope that you will cast a wide net, not just familiar territory, towns that you feel somehow are, in sync with your specific point of view. I think it's important that we find out what a lot of different towns are doing with different parties representing them and different problems and issues and demographics. Thank you.
Hi there. Am I good to go? Okay, so I wanted to get back. This is Perry Urso calling from Bear Property Management. I wanted to briefly just touch that resolution 20-207. I know that you were trying to make modifications and how people were submitting and if they were going to speak in person or if someone was going to read their comments. I also would want to know if you're going to consider, or I would hope that you would have considered, about people are taking the time and researching and just making the effort to call in or come in. And how are you going to address the questions Why are the questions not getting answered ever? So that in itself is very disturbing. You know, we're taking the time, but you and anybody else on the entire committee will not have the common courtesy to answer these questions back to your public. And I want to know, and that's what I wanted to comment on earlier when I was asked to dismiss myself. I'd like to move on. Number one, some of my Oprah request responses are heavily redacted. Is someone trying to hide something? Is the fox guarding the hen house? Number two, I'm still waiting for a written response from the local finance board as to whether certain committee members who would be our next mayor had a disqualifying conflict of interest or an appearance of impropriety. Number three, since the last meeting, my attorney served deposition notices for committee members Prupus, our mayor, committee member Wasserman, and the business administrator McDonald. If someone files a lawsuit with the 20-day estoppel period, is the effectiveness of the ordinance stayed? Last Thursday, what authority did the SID trustee board approve a walk-on oral motion to retain a marketing consultant? At the last committee meeting, did a committee approve and appropriate $1,000 to acquire a SID trustee insurance policy? Also, at the last TC meeting, we listened to a woman representing Cafe Monet pouring her heart out. It was interesting that sadly, 4 of the 5 districts are not being represented. You would think by now that you would get it. After all that you've stressed, that you rushed the SID to help the business. Are you really? Pass an ordinance once again without a feasibility study, a buy-in from commercial property owners, and what about the entire community? If commercial property owners are not in favor of the SID, why have you imposed this on the entire community?
Thank you.
Last Friday, Newark and Essex.
Ms. Urso, thank you for your comments. Great.
Hi there, can you hear me? Hi, I just want to say how rude and unprofessional that is, okay? My mother was not done speaking. You can give her the decency. She's a hard worker. My parents pay a lot of taxes in this town for you not to answer questions and are so nasty and disrespectful. The good people on this committee, you know who you are, okay? And the rest of you should really be ashamed of yourself. I am 24 years old. I know people that are more mature than all of you. Shame on you, and shame how the disrespect you just gave to my mom. So you know what? I'm gonna finish her questions. And hopefully you have the decency to look at this screen and not fiddle and cadoodle and do whatever you do. It's wrong. Shame on you. Hearing that, I've never seen something so dismissive. That honestly bothers me, and it shouldn't bother everyone in this Zoom watching and watching you in person. Her last point, you rudely interrupted her, was last Friday, Orange, Newark, and the Essex County freeholders posted meetings agendas and links to the agenda items. Millburn posted its agenda at 11:52 on Monday morning without access to the agenda items. This is Millburn Short Hills. Why are we being blinded to modern transparency technology times? Do you seek to keep us in the dark? Answer. I don't want to thank you. I say this every time. I was in front of you last week. Shame on you. Answer. The people deserve it. It's disgusting what you do. And people are disgusted with you, and they should see it by now. You're sick individuals. It's disgusting. People, don't give me the
Ms. Urso, I will not
people
listen to that rhetoric. Good night.
right, so I'm going to echo the same question. Nancy Stone, 10 Fielding Road, and Nancy and David Feinjohl's two businesses in town. So I'm going to echo the same thing because following these meetings very closely at 11:42, the agendas are posted. Why are the agendas posted so late? It's supposed to be 48 hours in advance. Why can't you just answer that question? You don't know? You can't answer? You're embarrassed to answer?
There is nothing that says.
48 hours.
There's nothing, there is nothing in.
There's no
I'll
48
have
hours?
Mr. McDonald answer that.
Well, I'll actually defer to Kit, but I
Okay.
think there's is there a requirement that states that the agenda must be posted 48 hours in advance of the township committee meeting?
So,
The Sunshine Law, notice of the time, date, and location and agenda of this meeting, to the extent known, was provided at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting in the following manner, pursuant to the provisions of NJSA 10-46, the Open Public Meetings Act. At least 48 hours in advance. So is that not like allowed? That is part of the agenda. I mean, anything that they do, we should have a right to know about. So is that not accurate then? Is this not part of the Public Meetings Act, an agenda? Okay.
you have to speak into the microphone.
Yes, but it's posted not without any time to review it or to analyze it or to write a letter, draft a letter. I mean, we're running businesses. We can't just drop everything because you guys decided to run. You get your packets on Friday. Why can't the public get the packet on Friday? That makes no sense. Anyway, it really doesn't matter what we have to say because you guys do whatever the heck you want. Or I could tell everybody, vote, vote, vote. Can't wait to see you out. I cannot wait. And you can smack that thing all you want. Good night. The end comments is disgusting too. Should be in the beginning. Do whatever the hell you want anyway. Smack it again, Jackie. Smack it again.
I will now close the public comment meeting, period. The Township Committee is now entering into closed session as previously approved, Resolution 20-208. The Township Committee will be returning to open session after their closed session meeting and may be considering further action.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Oh.